Hello, just before we start this podcast, I would like to pay tribute to Sunderland fan and former British Army Captain Chris Collier after he sadly passed away on Sunday night. Our thoughts at the Echo and of Graham, I'm sure, are with his fiancée and his kids, and also with everybody in Turkey as well after the sad earthquake there. Still waiting on news from former Newcastle player Christian Atsu. Our thoughts are very much with everybody over there, including Sunderland fans in Turkey as well, of which I know there are a few. But yes, welcome to the Raw podcast. My apologies for having to get it off on a somber note, but I thought it was right and proper that we note these things. I'm joined by Graham Atkinson of the Wise Men Say podcast. Graham, how are you doing?
Hello, mate. Yeah, good, thank you.
Good. We're hopefully expecting sobs of ALS as well at some point, but I think he's having difficulties getting on the stream. We'll be able to add him, hopefully, if he gets those issues sorted out. But Graham, we'll talk about Millwall and Fulham and all that. But the two stories today that have really dominated sort of Sunderland headlines have been the Charlie Methven to Charlton takeover rumours / reports, and also the Manchester City financial improprieties. We'll start with Methven. I feel it's our obligation to warn Charlton fans of the impending tornado that is about to hit them. Keep it clean. But what are your thoughts on Methven and those Charlton reports?
It's sympathies for Charlton supporters. It's difficult really to know where to start in terms of, if we wanted to sort of trot through the top 10 of concerns or issues that we've had as supporters when it comes to Charlie Methven. But I assume he's gonna, he's the sort of figurehead. He's not presumably stumping up a significant amount of his own cash because, if he follows the same pattern as he did for the Sunderland takeover, I'm assuming he's some sort of figurehead for others with the sort of financial clout. I don't know the detail behind it, but yeah, I suppose it would be just to see as Charlton supporters, I think they probably can expect some rough times ahead. So sympathies to them, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's reported to be he's sort of fronting it up, some sort of US investment behind him. But just for old time's sakes, when Methven was at Sunderland, obviously he purchased the club alongside Stuart Donald and Madrox. The purchase of the club was leveraged against the Premier League parachute payments, which obviously didn't sit well with Sunderland fans. There was the MSD Holden story that they had bought the club when they hadn't. That was under his watch as well. They did secure a £10 million loan from MSD, which was leveraged against club assets, which was hugely concerning at the time. There was the academy situation, the selling of several highly rated youngsters, Barley Mumba, Sam Greenwood, Logan Pye, Lucas Stevenson. I'm probably forgetting a few as well. Joe Hugel. There was the setting Jack Ross 100 points total in League One. After Jack Ross failed to live up to those pretty lofty expectations, Methven and Donald then appointed Phil Parkinson. He did call Sunderland fans parasites as well. He later apologised for that. There was the questionable handing of staff members, which Sunderland Till I Die laid bare for the world to see, and there was the hammering of fans again at a supporters meeting. They also entertained Mark Campbell as a possible buyer for the club. So it's a bit of a litany of disasters, Graham, isn't it, really?
Did you mention the entrepreneurs comment there?
No, I didn't. I didn't.
Yeah,
I didn't.
So obviously in the Northeast, we're not capable of understanding business. I think that was something along those lines, wasn't it? I mean, just like you say, a litany of disasters, one after the other. I mean, for someone who has that PR background, it always felt as though someone within the club must have been on his shoulder trying to kind of watch out for the metaphorical fires he was igniting. So yeah, sympathies to Charlton supporters.
Indeed, the other big story, very annoying from a Sunderland point of view, actually, is the Manchester City financial impropriety story. They're going to be in a battle with the Premier League for a while over this one. The Premier League aren't happy. It's over a 9-year period, which includes Sunderland's 2014 Carabao or Capital One Cup final, lost to Manchester City, Obviously, that competition's administered by the EFL, so there's no suggestion that anything could be done over that. But there's been, I think, first off to say, Graham, these accusations / charges, or whatever you want to call them, against Manchester City from the Premier League are pretty unprecedented, to be honest. So we don't know what punishment Manchester City will receive. There's rumours that they won't even be able to appeal it like they did with the UEFA charges a couple of seasons ago. There could be a stripping of Premier League title. There's even people talking about relegation or points deductions. Who knows what will happen? But hugely frustrating from a Sunderland fan's point of view, given that cup final and the chance to win at Wembley, going 1-0 up as well. And if thinking back to that cup final as well, Man City won it with their bench and being able to change the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, if the whole thing around financial fair play is to try and ensure that there's some sort of competitive, fair and competitive process that kind of sits behind how these football clubs are run. And if there's been an unfair advantage at any point during the time that the current owners have run the club, then any other team, any opposition is gonna rightly feel rankled, and us included. I think, as you say, it's unprecedented. I think was there 100 allegations, 100 charges against them. I mean, it feels fairly weighty. I think the Premier League are probably going to want to try and show that they've got some teeth when it comes to governing their own league. Obviously, there'll probably be some, political elements to it, with the proposals around having some independent regulator that kind of governs over football. So this is, I'm sure Man City will try and fight it. I'm sure they'll probably look at some of the allegations, and I think I read somewhere around the fact that some of the charges or the allegations have come in the form of emails and of these being leaked and so on. So I'm sure they'll push it. I'm sure they'll charge it. But we're no different, I'm sure, to anyone else who've lost out against Man City in the last few seasons. If
Stoke as well. I'm thinking of that FA Cup final.
Yeah, if there's been any unfair advantage through financial irregularities, then, and you just wonder whether or not it'll end up being a case of, will there be fine? Will some of these charges end up watered down and there'll just be a fine? Because I think it's how far the Premier League want to push it. But it would be nice if we could benefit retrospectively. It probably there's little merit in winning a trophy 9 years later, but whatever it is. But
yeah, it would be bittersweet, wouldn't it, to sort of win it not on the pitch. I don't think it'll happen, to be honest. On that Premier League, and whether they're going to be harsh or not, I think we're all still waiting for the sanctions from the Super League, aren't we? So I think they were pretty soft on that. I'm going to welcome in now. So we've got Owen David, the SAFC exiled Macklem, is going to fill in tonight for Sobs, who's having technical difficulties. Welcome to the podcast, Owen. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, James. Thank you for having me on. Hello, Graham. How are you? It's good to be on, and good to talk Sunderland Football Club. So yeah, all good to be here, mate. Thank you very much for the invite.
I'm actually pleased to announce that Sobs is here. Sobs, how are you doing, mate?
Oh, I managed to find it on my phone eventually. My laptop's not speaking to it, but
well, brilliant. So, gentlemen, on the agenda tonight, we've had the Charlie Methven story. We'll go to Sobs first. What's your take on Charlie rocking up at Charlton Athletic potentially?
Well, I'll have to get in touch with my old university mate Keith, who's a big Charlton fan, and have a good giggle at him, because I can't believe they've bought that snake oil story again about the 3 American billionaires or whoever he's got allegedly in tow, because it's been so well publicised. We've made a television series out of it. They can, I hope for their sake it doesn't go wrong, but you just get the feeling that it might be very much the same old story.
Yeah, indeed. Owen, what's your take on the Charlie Methven situation? Keep it clean. We are a family podcast, and I know Charlie Methven can raise pulses among Sunderland fans.
Yeah, I always try and keep it clean. I always try and avoid any potty mouth language. But I pity poor Charlton. I think Charlton fans, go and watch Sunderland Till I Die. You'll see what sort of a person he is. You'll see what sort of an owner he is. As you tweeted out earlier, James, the way he speaks to staff, what he says, the fact that he called fans parasites, which he later apologised for, the lies he tells about, the fans demanding the club be so. I pity Charlton. They're a good community club, and I really do worry for them if Methven gets involved with them, and especially if he takes his mate Donald with him.
Absolutely. Sobs as well, we touched very briefly, me and Graham, on the Manchester City situation. Obviously, a bit frustrating for Sunderland fans. A massive news story at the moment. What's your take on it?
Well, we've got the League Cup one before Newcastle did. Get in. Well, the thing is, it'll mean nothing because they got done years ago, didn't they? Not that many years back. For illegal deal, they got fined 39 million quid, and it's like taking small change out of the pockets unless they take points off them now, or give them a 10-point at least debit at the start of next season. Then it's pointless doing anything because they just chuck more money at it.
Yeah, Owen, what's your opinions on that?
I agree with Sobs. I think, unless you actually give them a big point deduction, or they take the same policy that Serie A took a couple of seasons ago when they relegated Juventus, and I think they relegated AC Milan as well. That's the only thing that clubs like that understand. There is no point fining Manchester City. They are, they've got billions. It's small change to them. And to be honest, if they fine them 10 points this season, I don't think it'll make the slightest bit of difference. You've really got to hit them hard. And I think this is a real test of the Premier League to see how strong they're actually going to be on things like this. Because I think, with the fact that the Premier League is so ruled by money, if they just give them a big fine, there's going to be clubs that are going to, you know what, we're going to do exactly the same because the precedent's been set now. So I really hope the Premier League take tough action, and I think they should follow the example of Serie A and relegate them. I really do think they should relegate them like they did with Juventus and AC Milan.
That would be an absolutely huge story. A huge story indeed. We'll move on to more Sunderland-focused matters now, Graham. We were speaking a little bit before we came on the podcast about Christian Speakman, that whole striker issue that seems to be dominating the discourse still a week afterwards. He came out, he gave an exclusive interview to Phil Smith, which you can read over on the Sunderland Echo. He also spoke to Frankie through club channels. Graham, what did you make of his words on both, I'm guessing, specifically around the striker situation?
I think you've got to sort of praise the club for the transparency in the way that, he's come out and kind of fronted up the decisions in the January transfer window. I think in terms of the striker situation, I do find his comments baffling around the fact that that our use of a number 9 isn't particularly prevalent in our side compared to others. I'm not really sure what he's been watching for the last couple of seasons, but we're heavily reliant on number 9s and focal points, and the data, the stats suggest that that's the case when we were without them for those sort of 7 or 8 games, those 3 months. So I think we were a striker short before we started. And in the summer, we should have had that third striker. Then I think we went down to have enough strikers, and we've seen what happened when we sort of took that risk. And I think lessons should have been learned. I don't think it was just a case of not being able to find one within 48 hours to go. I mean, we've not signed a permanent striker since Ross Stewart, so he had that shot across the bow there when we lost Stewart and Sims, and I feel like Gelhardt was that third striker. We've had all month to sign a replacement for Sims. We shouldn't have been reliant upon him returning. And I understand how Stewart is probably an ask too far in terms of replacing him. So yeah, deeply frustrated. I think if you look at the transfer window as a whole, the narrative around these things tend to be pretty polarized, and it's either been a really good window or a really, really bad one. I think the truth of it is, if you were looking at the whole, it's difficult to say because a lot of the lads that we've signed haven't kicked the ball in senior football. But I think if you're judging it on potential, then we've signed some good players there who hopefully can develop. They've got good pedigree. The profile of them, is good. So hopefully they can develop. But the striker situation, I find that baffling and really frustrating.
Owen, we'll go to you first, as I know you've got limited time with us with other commitments tonight. But how are you feeling generally about Sunderland's depth and particularly that striker issue? Obviously, came to the fore again at Millwall. Geldhart coming into a new side didn't really click for him, but he looks a good player. He probably needs a couple of games to sort of feel his way into Sunderland's side. Where's your head at with it all?
I agree. I think Graham was right. It is very baffling how it's two transfer windows now we haven't been able to solve the striker problem. And the bit that I found a little bit concerning was that I think both Mowbray and Speakman both said, unless I misread it, that they were happy with the two strikers, Stewart and Geldhart. That was, and had Stewart stayed fit, I genuinely think they wouldn't have gone for a third striker unless Sims had by some miracle actually become free from Everton. It's the one, but it does really concern me because I think, you look at the games we've played and a lot of times it's very pretty, it's very good football up onto that final third. But, when there isn't a Stewart there or there isn't a Sims there, there's no target, there's no point to play the ball through to. And that's where it breaks down. And if you look at, Geldhart on Saturday, it is going to take time for him to adapt. Of course, it is coming into a team. He hasn't played, a great deal of first team football, this season. But he goes out to the channels. He works the channels. He comes off to receive the ball. He's not a guy who goes in behind like a Sims and like a Stewart. And that is something we're missing, like in the Shrewsbury game when Stewart wasn't on. I mean, I know it was only Shrewsbury, but there was no out ball there until Stewart actually came on. And I think that's something we were really missing on Saturday. And after Stewart went off against Fulham, again, there was no target there. And that it does concern me. And I think over the next few weeks, they're going to have to try and adapt to not having that number 9 and playing perhaps a slightly different style because of the way Geldhart plays. But looking at the fixture list, there's an awful lot of Saturday coming up, even after this Fulham game. I think we've got Reading, and then we play, I think, against QPR away on the Tuesday night, and then we've got Bristol City on the Saturday. Then we've got another game again on a Tuesday or Wednesday night. So are they going to have time in training to make those adaptations? The depth elsewhere doesn't concern me, but the striker depth is a real concern for me going forward. And I think it's going to probably hold them back in terms of making that playoff push. Whatever you feel about that.
Yeah, which is a shame. Sobs, do you have a degree of sympathy for the recruitment team, given the bad luck here and there, injuries and recalls and whatnot, or is it a problem really that they should have had solved a window ago?
You would hope they'd solved it. You would hope. I've sort of been defending them, saying, of course they've been looking. It would be daft not to, but they are hard to find good strikers, especially we want one that'll hit the ground running. And that's even more so now that we haven't got Stewart. But if they're saying we don't need the number 9 as a focal point, like everybody else, I find that a bit strange, seeing as he's been very obviously a focal point. And as we've just discussed, Geldhart, he looked a bit lost at times because we were doing all the pretty stuff down the wings, some fantastic triangles down the right-hand side. But they're never going to take a chance and sling one to the penalty spot when you've got a 5'9" centre forward against a 6'4" centre half. He's just not going to win the ball. So we were stopping and looking for other options, runners coming in, and it didn't really happen. Although they, have to say that the whole team never give up. They don't sort of let their heads go down. The spirit was there right till the end of the game, and they were still chasing for it. But it is a strange situation where no strikers at all could be found apart from another one on loan. You would have thought there's got to be somebody out there somewhere that could have come in and done a job at some stage without, we're now stuck on the free agents. So whether we go for another big 2 in Lafferty and Wickham, who knows?
Yeah, Chris Martin as well has just got to QPR today, and he's probably one of the only acceptable options out there. Speakman distanced himself from the free agent market entirely. I think the concerning thing for me is that Geldhart's obviously a good, tidy player with pedigree, scored in the Premier League. I've no doubt he'll be a success for Sunderland, but that focal point is a massive issue. I'll use the Burnley game as an example. Sunderland went 2-0 up at the Stadium of Light. Burnley changed things in the second half, came on strong, started to show the quality, and Sunderland just needed an out ball, and they didn't have Sims or Stewart at that point because they were both injured. But they were desperate for somebody just to hold the ball, get them up the pitch. And you can win games playing nice, tidy football with Gelhardt coming deep. I've got no doubt about it. But sometimes when the screw is being turned in big games against good teams in the Championship, you need somebody to hit, Graham. You need a player to hit.
Well, Gelhardt, you do, yeah. Gelhardt, for me, is more of a sort of playmaker, number 9.
Man, what a presser that was.
So I think we're going to have to just learn to adapt and change our approach again. So, we've thus far this season, it's all been about that out ball and focal point, and in defence as well. If you think about how effective Stewart and Sims are at set pieces and in defending in the box, we don't have that height now. So yeah, we've got a striker, and hopefully he does hit the ground running and provide some goals. I think it's unfair to judge him on the Millwall game. I mean, clearly, I think if any game was to make his debut, and that's probably the one in this league that we wouldn't want. I think Evans as well was a big miss, just having that experience in midfield. So if we, after a January transfer window as it was, if we wanted any game up next, it wouldn't have been Millwall, would have been my pick. So hopefully we can judge better on Saturday when he makes his debut at the stadium.
Absolutely. Owen, I'll throw this one to you first so you can get off for your next commitment. But what were your thoughts generally on the Millwall game?
I think it was really encouraging for me, because I think it was, there was that they never gave in. They just kept on fighting to the end, and that's the difference with this team. I mean, how many Sunderland teams in the past would have gone 1-0 down and would just collapsed, in recent years? But these lads never give up. They keep trying to play. They keep battling. They keep fighting, and they really do represent, I think, the shirt and the fans so well. I was really just proud of what they did on Saturday and how they just kept on going. And like the guys have said, Millwall is not an easy place to go and play. It is an absolute cold. Millwall are a very dirty team, and a physical team. And Sunderland fought back, and they did brilliant.
Excellent. Well, Owen, thank you very much for joining us. And you can, of course, head over to Owen's YouTube channel as well. Owen, tell us a little bit about that before you go.
I'm running a channel called the SAFC Exile Magnum. Bring you daily Sunderland videos and do podcasts as well. It's just news, views, updates about the club, and do live streams and things like that. So it's all stuff to do with the club we all love, and fantastic. So thank you very much for that, James. And thank you for having me on.
No worries, anytime. Enjoy SAFC Fan TV. I know that's where you're off next. Doing the rounds tonight.
Yeah, I'm off there next. Going the rounds tonight. Yeah. Okay. Take care, guys. Thank you, guys. See you later.
Bye. Right, Sobs and Graham Atkinson remain out of the four amigos. What shall we talk about next? Graham, we'll go to Sobs. We'll get your thoughts on the Millwall game. I thought, Dennis Serkin was incredibly brave to put his head in there like that. I do think, I wonder what Roy Keane's thinking if he's heard that. He's just doing his job. But I think it does take a degree of bravery to put your head right in there.
Well, it does, because he didn't get off the ground. He didn't have to. But like the one he scored earlier in the season, he flung himself at. He was going to get there first, whatever happened. And from where we were stood, you heard the goalkeeper's fist make contact with him. And we mostly winced, and we were looking at him on the ground and just glanced aside and saw the ball go inside, just inside the post. So, yes, it sort of exemplified what the whole team's about. As Owen said there, they kept fighting to the end. They were under a lot of physical pressure, because I was counting the fouls, and I think we got up to 15 Millwall fouls by half time. And somehow the BBC only found another 4 in the second half. But it seemed like the manager said there was a foul every few seconds. And they lifted Roberts on one side, and then they lifted Clark on the other within seconds of each other. And the ref had a hard game to look after there, because he could quite have easily got up to 6 or 7 yellow cards by half time. Red would have been a bit generous to us. But the they've got a way of playing Millwall. They set about that. If you head the ball, fine well, you're going to get walloped immediately afterwards. And it took a naughty one on Patterson for the ref to have a real strong word with any of them, and it brought the first book in. So we sort of rose above it. It would have been easy to resort to like tactics, which you're probably not very good at, because our midfield in particular don't have the size of player like Roberts, Clark, Ahmad, Mishu. They're not going to kick people and hurt them. The Millwall lads are a lot bigger and stronger and more experienced in those dark arts, shall we call them. So it was a good character test, and we came through it positively.
It's a cliche, Graham, that the Den is a hard place to go. Millwall are a hard bunch to play in front of, but it's a cliche because there's usually an element of truth somewhere along the line. I think it was their biggest attendance since before Christ, or before Christ, 95, something like that. But Paul makes a good point there about Sunderland being such a young squad and being such a lightweight squad in many ways. A lot of technical players there, but other than Bath Ballard and the goalkeeper, you're sort of struggling to find a player over 6 foot.
Yeah, I think in on that basis, it has to go down as a positive result. I think they'll, if you think about how many players are probably have never faced anything like that. I mean, there was one or two, probably kick. I mean, Anderson came on for his debut, hadn't kicked the ball in senior football. Ekwa making his second appearance. Again, hadn't kicked the ball in senior football before that. Mishu, first season. Dan Neil, second season. A lot of inexperience, a lot of light, physically lads playing the game, and they wouldn't have come across anything like that. So, and probably struggle to. I can't think of another side really in the Championship where they'll come up against that. And I think on that basis, arguably we got lucky. We could have had a pen, probably on another day that their goal, their Honeyman goal stands. So, but we rode our luck. We got stuck in. I was pleased to see that Mishu, although he's kind of 7 stone wet through, can still he still sort of put himself about, and he doesn't shy away from a challenge and doesn't shirk from a challenge, which is good and pleasing to see. So I'm sure we'll come on to it, but in terms of Fulham, I wonder whether or not we could rest Dan Neil and drop him into the 6th role. And I think that would be my only concern with the games coming thick and fast, and arguably with the squad light, and we've still got a few 5 or 6 injuries there to first teamers. My view would be maybe we need to make a few changes on Wednesday.
Well, we'll come on to that issue, Sobs. I did enjoy Tony Mowbray's comment about Mishu at Millwall, saying that you don't get that in League One, League One. Sorry, I thought that. Yeah, I thought that was entertaining. But Sobs, Graham raises an excellent point. What do you do team selection wise for Fulham? Owen, who we had on earlier, was mentioning the fixture list. It's coming thick and fast. It's going to be 2 games a week. There's the backlog because of the World Cup and whatnot as well. Sunderland squad's pretty thin. They're all young. You want to avoid injuries as best you can, obviously, but it's a big game. Fulham Stadium of Light, FA Cup replay, and Sunderland actually don't have a striker for that game because Geldhart is cup tied.
Yeah, it's made of you want to win the league. Well, we say the league's more important, but in reality, we're not going to be challenging for the 1st or 2nd place in the league. So, how important is it compared to having a good cup run? But then you've got to protect your players, but you've got to play them. Otherwise, there's no point protecting them. And we don't know when. I forget when O'Nien's available again, but he played 7 days a week, so we need him back in there, and he might even play up front if we need him to. Who knows? He'll fill any role. But we are stuck without a striker on Wednesday. But we managed for 70 minutes at Fulham, and we just about matched the opposition. Came away with a replay in mind. So you've got to play them at some, and we've brought them all in. So that we've said the ones for the future, but the ones we've brought in have shown that they've got lots of ability. It's just the experience and like the match awareness that they're perhaps lacking. So we probably do well to give a couple of them a try on Wednesday. Burnett is obviously one who can occupy wide position if we decide we're going to go with pure speed instead of Roberts playing in small short passes with Ahmad and whoever's playing at the fullback position.
It's live on BBC One as well, Graham, which you want Sunderland to win every game, but you want them to put the best foot forward when it's beamed to a national television audience. But how would you go about negating that striker problem? It's a big question for Tony Mowbray. Sobbs has laid out some options there, but there's no real natural fix. And Max Thompson, it's a bit of a big game to even have him on the bench, really. Do you think Sunderland just sort of go with a false nine, Ahmad floating around? But would you maybe give him a break as well? It's such a tough one.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, if Ahmad is then injured,
no, I don't even want to consider that.
So, do you play Ahmad centrally? Do you have the false nines, Clark? Did Jewison Bennett play centre forward for his country?
I think so. Yeah, but he doesn't look like a natural English number 9. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's a tough. Yeah, that'll be a tough assignment for him. I think that.
Yeah, I'll probably bring 09 back into it. And Pritchard when he gets some minutes, and then if he gets a half, and then a bit longer on Saturday. It's a difficult balancing act because it's like you see, and I think probably the other thing to say though is whoever they pick, I think will put a performance in, and that sort of the style of player that the interplay between the players, I think, seems to be instilled into them. So whoever turns out, I'm sure there'll be a performance or a display there, and I'm sure they'll be entertained. I think it's a big occasion to throw in some of the youngsters, but I think, with this squad being as light as it is, it's probably a game where they're going to have to just kind of be chucked into the deep end, I think. For some of them, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily sweeping changes, but I certainly think maybe 3 or 4 changes I'd be inclined to make.
Indeed. We'll quickly whiz on to the last topic on my list, Sobs. Back on the contract front now, Christian Speakman did say that Alex Pritchard and Danny Bart are under contract for next season. Their original contracts were due to expire in the summer, but he revealed that they've both got options which have been triggered, similar to Ross Stewart. I think that's good news for me. I think Bart has probably been low-key player of the season, and Pritchard in those early days, early championship days, I think was instrumental in winning and drawing and getting points. So I'm pretty pleased with that.
I'm very pleased. There were rumours because of Bath's age that he would go in the summer, but I think especially with Bailey Wright looking like he's going to be on his way, we need to maintain some experience at the heart of defence, even though Dan Ballard looks like he's been around for ages. And Pritchard showed, his ability with a dead ball on Saturday. Ironically, put it to where Ross Stewart would have been, and it was down to an average size fullback to get his head to it. But he just shows what somebody like that can do with the ball at his feet. And he's also somebody who was forgotten until he became fit again. So he's an option to have, as we've talked about, false nines and whatever, deep lying forwards who are going to be there in the centre in some shape or form. He's a guy who's probably got more goals in him than he's shown for us. So let's hope that he starts getting his shooting boots on as well as playing those clever balls in. Pleased with those decisions, Graham?
I feel like they need to keep that a core of the squad together. I think it's important that we keep as many experienced players as we possibly can. Bailey Wright leaving, I think probably isn't a huge loss on the pitch. But then it's kind of what he provides off the pitch and what other experienced players provide off the pitch in terms of a guiding hand, a kind of a common voice when maybe games or results aren't necessarily always going our way. It's that those sorts of things that are difficult to quantify that you don't realise the bring, or some supporters maybe not realise the bring when it's off the pitch. So I think is certainly with the average age of the squad's 22. I think we need to keep the likes of Pritchard and Bart at the club as long as we can, and hopefully other leaders will emerge. I think we've touched on Dan Ballard and yeah, I think I read somewhere this week that he's a bit of a voice as well in the behind the scenes, and I'm sure when one goes, other voices kind of fill that space, and maybe Ballard is one of those that he'll grow into more of a leadership role.
Indeed, I think that just about wraps up the podcast. Can I just say, Sobs, though, I was listening back to last week's podcast, and who's Patrick Stewart?
He's a friend of Brian Blessed's, I believe.
No, that did make me chuckle. That was good stuff. Well, gentlemen, once again, thank you very much for joining me. It's been a great honour having you both on the podcast. You can find Sobs' work, of course, over at ALS, and Graham Atkinson and the lads over at the Wise Men Say podcast. I think they have a Monday show out around about now. Plenty of written content on both sites as well. But yeah, gents, thank you once again for listening. You can find, of course, I'll get shot if I don't say this, loads of content over at the Sunderland Echo as well. We're on TikTok, YouTube, all of that good stuff. Yeah, once again, thank you very much.
You're welcome.